by Amy Eddy. Amy?
Snap that green, turn it back on, so I'm sweatpants. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
All right, where do you have it?
We might have a theme for the evening so far. I think most of you are familiar with the Western Tradition Partnership case versus Bullock, and that was the case that Western Tradition Partnership, a Colorado corporation, filed against the Attorney General and the Commissioner of Political Practices to dismantle Montana's campaign regulations on independent expenditures by corporations. Our Attorney General was the only Attorney General in the country to actually defend state campaign finance regulations in the wake of Citizens United, and Steve Bullock provided congressional testimony on that. He argued it in front of the district court. They took it to the Montana Supreme Court where they prevailed. They appealed it all the way through to the United States Supreme Court, where ultimately we lost. But I nominated Steve for this award in his office for the work that they have done in preserving campaign finance regulations, which really speak to individual people's access to the courts and right to vote and right to participate in the political process. And that office has continued to defend Montana's disclosure laws. They are defending a case right now where the Republican Party wants to be able to endorse nonpartisan judicial candidates, and that office has been committed to defending these regulations in the face of overwhelming opposition. People said we were completely crazy. Apparently we are. But on appeal, Steve got 26 state attorney generals to file an amicus brief and finally came in support of states being able to regulate corporate independent expenditures. Steve is not here tonight. I hear he's in function up in Whitefish. But Jim Malloy, who is his senior consumer protection attorney, is here to accept it on his behalf. Jim is a former MTLA board member, and we're so pleased to have him here in the Attorney General's office.
Well, I'm here to accept on Steve's behalf, and he regrets he couldn't be here. He had committed to Terry Treeweiler that he would be at his neighborhood tonight and couldn't change that, so that's where he is right now as we speak. But seriously, does sincerely regret having committed to some things that he couldn't change by the time that he received this honor. And I can tell you that it's a deep, sincere honor for him to accept this on behalf or from this organization. It's an honor he wants to share with two members of this organization, one of whom you just heard from, and that's Amy Eddy, and the other is Larry Anderson. In this effort, we had organizations and interest groups from around the country contacting Steve and saying, you need to make this about something bigger than and broader than and other than Montana. And initially we pushed back on that, said, no, this is our case, and we think the Montana Supreme Court has done a masterful job of navigating its way through, frankly, an Alice in Wonderland crazy world created by Citizens United. But what happened in the case was it unfolded in a way that it became a national case. In the meantime, though, Larry Anderson and Amy Eddy stood up, gave of their own time, and put efforts in to write masterful amicus briefs that went to the Supreme Court. And we had national law firms weighing in with work that was in no way superior to the work done by two of our members, and Steve wants to express his appreciation to the work they did, and we should all be proud. They represent the best of what we are. So I hope you will join me in thanking Amy and Larry for the work they've done in this effort. And if you'll forgive me 1 minute here, I'm going to say things that maybe Steve wouldn't say if he were standing up here. I want to pick up on what Rick Friedman was talking about at the end of his talk today and emphasize to you where we are and what we're facing and what things are at stake in our country. And it's a battle that Steve took up and fought with pride. And he now has the biggest target on his back of any governor candidate in the United States. He's fond of quoting a newspaper editorial that said the single biggest issue facing us today is whether the corporations will control the people or the people will control the corporations. That was an editorial in 1906 in Montana, written, ironically, by an editor by the name of Romney. And if you don't think that there's an agenda that's taking place in this country that is putting at peril the very way we live and the values that are important, you're mistaken. And here's where I'm going to be blunt, and I'm going to tell you, we have something very, very important at stake. Governor Schweitzer has stood in the face of some zany things that have been put forth in this state that would totally change the way this state is. And if we don't elect Steve Bullock as governor, you sit back and watch what's going to happen. So please don't sit back in the meantime. I want to give you my personal email address. It's jimmalloy@hotmail.com. And that's with an O, not M-E-L-O-Y. It's M-O-L-L-O-Y. We spell it the correct way. But I'm going to ask you, seriously, to send me an email and tell me how you think you can help. Obviously, money's necessary, but it's more than money. This is very, very important. And I'll tell you that Steve Bullock loves the job he has. I know because I sat in his office a few years ago saying, you know, Mike Weed's probably going to kick your butt if you run for Attorney General. I said, you should run for Insurance Commissioner. He said, there's a problem with that. I want to be Attorney General. And he ran and he got elected and beat a good friend of ours. He loves the job he has. But he took the call to duty, and he wants to be the governor to protect the state that we have. And it's really, really important that we all do what we can do to make that happen, because I guarantee you that target on his back is going to be very visible when you start seeing. Rick Hill is not even worried about the fact that he has 1/7 the amount of money that Steve Bullock has. He's not worried at all because he knows that his friends, including Chris Christie, Bernie Madoff's former lobbyist, are going to step up and they're going to bring in a bunch of money and they're going to run a distorted campaign. And the other person you need to support is Pam Ducey. Because I'll tell you, there is an agenda there. I see it. I was telling someone earlier today, I could go 4 or 5 times a year to an all-expense paid, very comfortable, luxurious seminar 4 times a year put on by the Law and Economics Institute, where they're going to come and try to inculcate in me their lack of values. They know what they're doing. They're spending unlimited funds to get there. And we have to come back to what Rick Friedman talked about, and that is there are values at stake. You can do something, and that is to help at least get the right people elected, because if we don't have that, it's going to be a very, very different state that we're going to live in. But again, in closing, Steve sincerely wanted you to know how much he appreciates the tireless efforts that both Amy and Larry offered in this, and Amy continues to do it. Mike Lamb stepped up in the case that we're talking about on behalf of Beth Best, and so we can all be proud of this organization for the work that our members are doing to try to do the right thing. So on Steve's behalf, very sincerely, thanks very much.